Hi everyone. So this is our jumping into actually learning the content of becoming an influencer. And this is designed just to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about throughout the course and sort of lay out the progress that we're going to make. So let's start by just saying, what is an influencer? And throughout this, if we were doing this in a face-to-face class, this is something that we would have as a discussion where I would ask for your thoughts. I'm going to try to mimic that as much as possible on the discussion boards, but within these sort of video lectures, we don't have that opportunity. So I would encourage you at times like this, when I pose questions like this, to maybe pause the video and just jot down a couple notes of what you would say if I were to call on you in class, because it'll give you a baseline to contrast what your initial thoughts are with the material that I present. So this is a good opportunity to write down what you think an influencer is. For the purposes of class, we're going to use two parts to this definition. One is someone who has a following in the community or around the topic that they engage in. So influencers are not kind of high-level general influencers that influence everything. They tend to be people who influence in a particular space. So that could be someone who's a celebrity and influences people about all kinds of topics, even though it's not the thing that they're famous for in the first place. But they still have a community, and that's the people who are fans of them. Other influencers are people who build a reputation within a particular niche and then have a following within that about that topic. So someone who has a following in the community that they engage in, and then two, someone who influences their behaviors and the interests of their followers. So those behaviors could be things that people buy, things that they share or retweet, projects that they engage in. So do they go volunteer? Do they donate money? Do they go harass someone because they were told to do that by someone who's influential to them? And the interest, so if I'm a fashion influencer and I start wearing a particular brand, that may increase interest among my followers in that brand. So that's the influential part. So you have to have a following in your community, and then you also have to influence it. And you can have some of these without others. So you can have a following in a community and have no influence in that community. You can think of these as people who are trolls, potentially. They certainly can be someone that you know about and who doesn't have any influence. So as an example, in the running community that I'm part of, and these are people who run really long races, there's a troll in that community who goes under the name Jane Benfer. She pops into Facebook groups, but also Twitter discussions, and kind of laughs at everything people's doing, and occasionally will write screeds, but mostly makes inappropriate, like laughing emoji responses to people's posts. And she'll do this where there's a post about a race, there's 100 responses in the comment section, and she will post the laughing emoji response to every single one of them. Someone did an investigation, and it turns out she's actually a former runner in this space who seems to have had some weird mental break and now likes to say everything is fake and a conspiracy theory and no one actually runs these races, and harasses people who do. So she has a big following in the community. Like, people know who she is, they keep track of what she's doing, but she has absolutely no influence over this community. Nobody cares about what she thinks. Everybody just thinks she's sort of crazy. So she has a following. She's engaged in the community in a kind of negative way, but she's definitely not an influencer. We could probably stretch this and think of people who influence behaviors and interests of their followers, but who aren't engaged in the community, but it's a little bit of a stretch, so we'll kind of leave that one alone. So generally, the important thing here is that the idea of an influencer is someone who has a following and then influences the behavior of those followers. So essentially, they're looked to with some sort of respect or with some level of expertise among the people who follow them. Okay, so how do you actually become an influencer? You could just be really famous in the first place. So if you're an A-list celebrity, you get on social media, you start telling people what vitamins to take. A lot of people are going to listen to you, even though you don't have any expertise there. And it's because your celebrity is something people want to mimic and be close to. assuming you're not already a celebrity, which you're not if you're in this class, you want to become important in your community. So that means creating good content that people want to read, that they're interested in following you to get more of, and that they want to share with a bigger audience. Engaging with others in your community of interest. So a common mistake people make when they want to become an influencer is that they start putting content up and then they just expect people to come and follow them. And maybe they use the right hashtags, they get some stuff shared broadly, but then they just wait for people to come. And, occasionally that will happen, like you're just putting good stuff out there enough that people discover you and follow you. But usually, especially when you're getting started, it's much more effective if you are engaged in that community. So whether you're writing fan fiction or creating a cooking blog or starting a fashion Instagram, you want to be looking to other people who are engaged in that community and interacting with them, commenting, sharing their own things, showing that you have shared interests and you're someone who is nice, who's interesting, who also has good content that they're interested in. So that engagement in the community is a really important step that a lot of times people overlook. And then build a following by creating content that attracts new people. And that's a little bit different than just creating good content. Certainly if you're creating great content, it's hopefully going to attract people. But you want to think strategically about how do you get some of that content shared to people who aren't in your immediate circle. So for example, if you're, say, starting a cooking blog, you're making great posts, right? Your blogs are interesting, they've got good recipes, it's got really good pictures and visuals. How do you actually get that content to attract new people who aren't following you? And that means using strategies like how do you get it shared on other platforms? So cooking bloggers, for example, are going to take a lot of good photos with right text and captions around it that can get shared on Pinterest because that drives a lot of traffic for cooking. If you're on Instagram, it's finding the right hashtags that's going to get your content seen by people who don't already follow you and out to a broader community to potentially bring in followers. It's tagging the right people in a way that's not obnoxious and spammy, but that does get it to the attention of people who are likely to share it out to bigger audiences. So that strategy about when you have the right content, doing things to get it broadcast out to a bigger audience and then hopefully bring in followers is something that is a sort of necessary step to get you over that hump from I've built a sort of small community. You can get to a couple thousand people like that, but to kind of cross that threshold into 10,000 people and then bigger requires some success with these sharing of posts that are going to get seen by people who care and who want to come back and follow you. Okay, so what are we going to cover in class? We're going to start today talking about how to choose a platform. As you saw in the video where I talked about my own social media, I post on a ton of different platforms and I tend to use them for different things. So you absolutely may choose multiple platforms, but you want to think about, what's the kind of content you have and where does it fit in the ecosystem of social media platforms? How do you actually make good content? What does that look like? How to understand your audience's reaction, which we'll especially look at in terms of analytics going forward. How do you reach a bigger audience? So that's what are those strategies that we talked about on the previous slide to get your content seen by more people, shared more broadly, and hopefully bring in new followers. How to avoid getting into trouble. So we'll cover things like copyright law, where you can actually have your content removed, which would be bad. Stealing other people's ideas, which may or may not get removed, but likely can piss off a lot of people in your community. How do you avoid making mistakes with things like hashtags? So there are examples, for example, of companies who use trending hashtags to draw people to their products when those hashtags are around national tragedies that have just happened. That's very much in poor taste to hijack a trending topic about something tragic to try to bring people into something that doesn't have anything to do with it. And then how do you deal with trolls and harassers, which always come out of the woodwork once you have stuff that's popular. And then finally, how to monetize your content if you want to. as I said, we've kind of made a conscious choice not to do a lot of monetization, but many people want to become influencers, particularly for the opportunities and the ability to make some income off of that. So we'll talk about different strategies for monetization, what that means to the people who follow you, how to do it in a way that's not going to alienate your followers, and how you can potentially make some money. So that's a kind of brief outline of how we're going to be approaching this. The way that we're going to work in this class is that you are going to build yourself an influencer account. So to do that, obviously you're going to have to make accounts in this class. Normally I always find ways for people to get around this in my classes, even the ones that focus on social media. But the point of this class is how to become an influencer, and you are going to have to work on it. So you will need to create social media profiles for this class. They don't have to have your actual name on them. They can absolutely be anonymous. There are strategies you can use to create new email addresses, which I actually think is a great idea in general, to have your own kind of full online presence dedicated to that social media platform, so it's not immersed with the rest of your life. So make a new email address, set up your accounts under that name that you pick. You're welcome to put your face and name to it, but that's absolutely not required. But most of the exercises that we're doing going forward will be you creating content, posting content, analyzing it, trying to build a following, like actually doing the stuff that we're teaching. So you have to be comfortable in this class posting things online. You can do pretty much whatever topic you want. The main restriction that I like to lay out is that I don't want you to do anything that's going to get the university sued, that's going to get me fired. Try not to do something that the Washington Post or Fox News or whatever is going to do a story on to say, can you believe the University of Maryland is teaching people to do this? So probably not porn. There's really interesting ways that porn has co-opted and influenced and changed and advanced pretty much every stage of the internet. Being an influencer is definitely one of those things. Porn has embraced social media and has some great strategies for using it. It's probably not the thing you should be doing for a university class. If you have really strong feelings that you want to do porn for this class, drop me a message and we'll talk about what your options are. Don't do anything illegal, so I don't want you breaking into abandoned buildings and filming them. There are accounts like that and they're fascinating and I like to follow them, but I don't want you to do it for this class. So yeah, avoiding illegal things. If you feel like you have anything kind of on the borderline that people might be critical of, I just want you to talk to me about that. A lot of influencers are controversial and provocative, and I can be okay with that, but we want to make sure we talk through your options. I suspect most of you are artists, or you're working on professional accounts, you're trying to influence in a space that's just something that you personally care about that doesn't carry a lot of controversy with it, and that's fine. So think about those topics, and when we get into the assignment for this week, we're going to kind of lay that out and talk about what those options are. So there you go. That's an outline of what we'll be covering for the semester. The next video, we're going to actually dive into how to make these choices about where you're going to have your platform and what your account will be about.